In September of 2013, 26-year-old Tiffany Witten walked into a Walmart in Marietta, Georgia, and was never seen again. Around 2 a.m., she was caught shoplifting and confronted by store security. Panicked, Tiffany kicked off her shoes and bolted out of the store barefoot, leaving behind her phone, purse, and everything she owned. Her boyfriend who was with her stayed behind and gave conflicting stories about what had happened to her. At first, security assumed she'd return for her belongings, but she never did. Several days passed before anyone officially reported her missing. Despite mass searches, tips, and national coverage, no trace of Tiffany has ever been found. On September 25, 1980, Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham drank an estimated 40 shots of vodka in less than 24 hours. He passed out at Jimmy Page's house where he was put to bed but never woke up. The next morning, Bonham was found dead at just 32 years old, having choked on his own vomit while unconscious from the alcohol. His death forced Led Zeppelin to permanently disband, cementing his legacy as one of rock's most tragic losses. In the summer of 1962, Old Yeller author Fred Gibson's family was suddenly struck by tragedy. His son Mike discovered their dog chained up in a shed and brutally clubbed to death, a sight so devastating that he took his own life just a few days later. Not long after, Gibson's marriage also fell apart, while the dog's killer was never identified. This one's actually insane. In 2010, 55-year-old Greg Flanagan was found dead on the floor inside of his locked hotel room in Texas. There were no signs of a break-in or robbery, as Greg's wallet was still in his back pocket with cash inside. He had suffered no obvious external injuries, but had massive internal damage, including broken ribs, damage to his liver and intestines, and a hole through his heart. Flanagan's death was soon ruled an unsolved homicide, despite coroners having no idea what actually happened to him. After an 8-month investigation, it was revealed that he died from a 1-in-a-million series of events. A drunk guest in the next hotel room accidentally fired a single bullet through the wall while playing with his pistol. While Flanagan was laying down watching Iron Man 2, the bullet hit him directly in the scrotum and continued up through his body and through his heart, likely killing him moments after he stood up and stumbled toward the door. Lance Moeller was later sentenced to 10 years in prison for his neighbor's bizarre accidental murder. This incredibly rare cardinal is called a bilateral gynandromorph, meaning it is male on one side and female on the other. This man developed star-shaped cataracts after he was zapped by 14,000 volts of electricity. While he got some of his vision back after surgery, he is still legally blind as a result of the mishap. This snake with a clawed arm was found in China. While skeptics were quick to call this a hoax, scientists say it's technically not impossible, since some snakes are born with the remnants of vestigial limbs. A fisherman in Maine found this translucent lobster. Scientists say the odds of this happening are about 1 in 100 million. This was the moment a random passenger was suddenly shoved toward an oncoming train at Northgate Station in Seattle, Washington. The attack was completely unprovoked, with the victim pushed dangerously close to the edge as the train approached, but he somehow managed to stay on the platform and survive. Police later identified the suspect as Alexander J., who was arrested and charged, with court records citing prior incidents and ongoing mental health concerns. Here's a clip of a cassowary chasing down a vehicle in what looks like something straight out of Jurassic Park. Native to parts of Australia and New Guinea, cassowaries can sprint up to 30 miles per hour and are considered one of the most dangerous birds on Earth. With dagger-like claws on each foot and a reputation for aggressive charges, they've been known to seriously injure or even kill humans, making them one of the closest real-life reminders of what dinosaurs may have been like. Here's a video of a 500-pound man being rescued from a 15-foot hole at a construction site in California. Officials said the man wasn't a construction worker and somehow ended up trapped at the bottom, prompting a large emergency response to lift him out. Crews had to carefully extract him due to his size and the depth of the hole, and he was taken to a hospital afterward, though how he got there remains unclear. Just 2 days after his 18th birthday, star football player Warrick Dunn lost his police officer mother in a fatal shooting while she was off duty. But despite this, Dunn raised his 5 siblings while in college and was selected as the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft. He's since funded and built over 150 homes for single mothers, using his wealth to improve their lives. In 2008, suspected serial killer Ricky Simmons was found dead of heat stroke in the trunk of his ex-girlfriend's car. Investigators believe Simmons was waiting in the trunk to ambush and murder his ex-girlfriend when he became locked in the vehicle. A few years after receiving a bone marrow transplant to treat his leukemia in 2019, Nevada man Chris Long discovered that the DNA in his blood and semen had been completely replaced by that of his donor. Long had essentially become a chimera, a person with two different sets of DNA. He was quoted saying, "I thought it was pretty incredible that I can just disappear and someone else can appear." Experts say this was an extremely rare case, but one that raises serious questions about forensic evidence at crime scenes. This was the real-life Mean Girls, only instead of high school drama, it ended in unspeakable horror. When 12-year-old Shanda Scherer opened her front door one January night in 1992, she had no idea she was walking into one of the most horrific murder plots in Indiana history. Shortly after Shanda moved into town, classmate Melinda Loveless, jealous over Shanda's relationship with Loveless's ex-girlfriend, lured Shanda from her home under false pretenses with the help of 3 female accomplices. At a remote site called the Witch's Castle, they stripped, beat, and stabbed Shanda several times, inflicting painful but non-fatal wounds. Shanda, still alive, was forced into a car trunk and endured hours of torture, including burns from a cigarette lighter and a brutal sexual assault with a tire tool, causing severe physical trauma. The next morning, the group doused the conscious but weakened girl with gasoline and set her on fire, as she eventually died from thermal injuries and smoke inhalation. Her charred body was found in a field later that day, and the 4 perpetrators were arrested after one of the accomplices boasted to peers. Perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire case is that as of October of 2025, all of the perpetrators are now free, including the ringleader Melinda Loveless, who was released on parole in 2019. This is what a fully unearthed Easter Island head looks like. Yep, contrary to popular opinion, all of the statues have bodies. The torsos have just become partially buried as a result of hundreds of years of erosion. Although this gecko looks like it could still be alive, it's been trapped in amber for right around 54 million years. This 20,000-year-old cave painting found in South America is believed to depict a giant ground sloth. These massive sloths grew to around 20 feet in height but were hunted to extinction by humans about 12,000 years ago. In August of 2023, 73-year-old Roger Leadbeater was taking his usual evening walk with his rescue dog Max through a quiet park in Sheffield when he was suddenly hunted and murdered in one of the most savage random attacks in UK history. Security footage later showed 32-year-old Emma Boroway, a schizophrenic patient who had escaped from a psychiatric unit 2 days earlier, pacing around the park and hiding in the bushes before ambushing him. She stabbed Roger more than 50 times, including through the eye and repeatedly in the back as he tried to crawl away, inflicting a total of 124 separate injuries. His hands, arms, and legs were covered in defensive wounds, showing he fought desperately until he collapsed and died on the ground. When his family returned days later to leave flowers in the spot he died, they found the scene still covered in his blood, with the outline of his body visible and dog prints stamped around it. Emma later told police the devil had tricked her and called the killing a ritual sacrifice. She had previously killed animals, threatened staff, and repeatedly escaped custody. 4 months after being charged with Roger's murder, she took her own life in prison, while an inquest ruled his death was caused by catastrophic failures in mental health supervision. This was the last photo taken of Marie Joseph before she drowned in the swimming pool shown. Due to the cloudy water, her body wasn't found for 2 days, during which time people continued swimming in the pool, unaware that Marie's body was decomposing beneath them. In 2011, scientists conducted an experiment to find out what's inside the average human belly button. One individual who hadn't bathed in years hosted 2 species of bacteria that are typically only found in ice caps and thermal vents. In the year 2000, an orca whale killed a great white shark off the coast of California. According to satellite tags, the smell of the dead shark's carcass apparently caused all nearby great whites to suddenly vanish. One shark that was in the region immediately dove down 500 meters and swam straight to Hawaii without stopping. In the summer of 2025, Jordan Peterson nearly died after developing pneumonia and sepsis that left him in the ICU for weeks. His daughter later revealed that the illness began after he was exposed to heavy mold while cleaning out his late father's basement, triggering what she called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, a rare and unofficial life-threatening immune condition. He reportedly suffered nerve damage, extreme sensitivities to medication, and even paralysis. It wasn't the first time Peterson's health had spiraled. Years earlier, he'd endured a near-fatal benzodiazepine withdrawal that required months of treatment abroad. This latest crisis left him bedridden and fighting for his life once again, with his daughter saying that for days, doctors weren't sure if he'd survive. Now, months later, Peterson is slowly recovering. He has reportedly regained much of his mobility, is speaking and reading again, and continues intensive physical therapy from home. His daughter says he's still very fragile but improving daily, though his public appearances, lectures, and recordings remain on hold as he focuses on regaining full strength after what she called the closest he's ever been to dying. In April of 2026, at a Spada Park in San Antonio, 24-year-old Atharva Vyas randomly attacked a woman and her 3-year-old daughter. Witnesses said he grabbed the mother by the hair and threw her to the ground, forcing her to drop the child. He then grabbed the toddler and began biting directly into her face, causing severe trauma and knocking out multiple teeth as she screamed in horror. The attack only stopped when a bystander intervened and managed to restrain him until police arrived. The child was rushed to the hospital in total shock, suffering serious facial injuries and lasting psychological trauma. Vyas was arrested at the scene and is facing multiple felony charges, including injury to a child. According to the Department of Homeland Security, he was in the United States illegally after his visa was revoked, and ICE has placed a detainer on him. As of now, the motive remains unclear, and the case is ongoing as the child continues recovery. On March 4th, 1994, beloved comedian John Candy died of a heart attack at the young age of 43 while filming for Wagons East in Durango, Mexico. Candy long feared he would suffer the same fate as his father, who had also died of a heart attack at a young age. After years of struggling with weight issues, heavy smoking, and earlier drug use, Candy died in his sleep in the middle of production for the film. His death stunned Hollywood, and he was so beloved that when his body was returned to Los Angeles, police took the extraordinary step of shutting down the notoriously busy 405 freeway so his funeral procession could pass uninterrupted, a tribute typically preserved for presidents and other heads of state. On September 24, 2005, Mark Dixie spent his 35th birthday drinking at a pub in London before walking the streets with a knife. In the early hours of the morning, he followed 18-year-old Sally Bowman as she returned home and stabbed her repeatedly outside her own front door. Her body was discovered just steps from safety. Dixie evaded arrest for 9 months until he was involved in an unrelated pub fight, and his DNA was entered into the national database, where it directly matched evidence from the murder scene. In 2006, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years. To unlock the secrets of a genius, the man who performed Einstein's autopsy stole his brain and kept it in a jar for 20 years. He found that the part of Einstein's brain that processes math and language was 15% bigger than the average human's. Throughout history, a total of 9 nuclear submarines have been lost around the world. Most of them are still on the ocean floor with nuclear weapons that are still intact. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a hickey. The suction created a blood clot that traveled to his brain, eventually causing a stroke. When the Soviet Union was pushing toward Berlin during World War II, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. In 2010, 7-year-old Ayanna Stanley Jones was sleeping on her grandmother's couch in Detroit when a police raid quickly turned deadly. Officers were filming for the A&E show The First 48 as they stormed the home in search of a murder suspect, tossing in a flash grenade before bursting through the door. Within seconds, a bullet fired by Officer Joseph Weekly struck Ayanna in the head, killing her instantly. The officer claimed the gun discharged accidentally after a struggle, but witnesses said he just fired blindly into the darkened home. No one was ever convicted for her death. Ayanna would have turned 25 this year, a haunting reminder of how a child's life was tragically cut short in a moment meant for TV. In the early 1980s, South Korean photographer Lee Dong-sik was convicted of murdering a woman just so he could photograph her dying. Reports from a Korean newspaper say he met the victim, gave her a drink laced with potassium cyanide, and took more than 20 photographs as she slowly died in agony. During questioning, he claimed he wanted to capture the moment of death as part of his art. He was soon arrested, charged with her murder, and executed 4 years later. If you were born prematurely, you can thank this man for your life. In the early 1900s, most physicians believed that premature babies were weaklings that were unfit to survive into adulthood and therefore not worth saving. But a sideshow entertainer named Martin Cooney decided to change that with his innovative incubators he called child hatcheries. He would display premature babies at amusement parks around the world through his exhibit called the Infantorium, where visitors could pay 25 cents to view a room full of glass boxes containing tiny babies. Cooney would use the earnings to work with nurses and doctors to do everything he could to keep the babies alive. His goal was to demonstrate to the public that premature babies could be saved with proper care. Through his efforts, Cooney saved over 7,000 lives, and by 1943, nearly every hospital in America had one of his incubators. His work completely changed the public's perception of premature babies and significantly contributed to the development of modern neonatal care. Here's a photo of Daniel Pearl during his captivity in 2002, after the Wall Street Journal reporter was kidnapped in Pakistan while investigating extremist networks. Pearl was held by militants linked to Al-Qaeda, and investigators later concluded he was murdered by Khalil Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of the 9/11 attacks. After weeks in captivity, a video surfaced showing Pearl forced to read statements on camera before he was beheaded, with the footage circulating online as extremist propaganda. The killing drew worldwide outrage, not only for its brutality, but because Pearl had been abducted while simply pursuing a journalism assignment. Here's a body cam still of Tiffany Taylor speaking with police after she escaped an encounter with New Jersey serial killer Khalil Wheeler Weaver in 2016. Taylor told officers that he targeted black sex workers because he believed their disappearances would draw less attention, but her report was not fully acted on at the time. Prosecutors later said Wheeler Weaver continued killing, targeting vulnerable women he met online. Frustrated by the lack of progress, friends of one victim carried out their own social media investigation, eventually helping link him to multiple cases. The information ultimately contributed to his arrest, and he was later convicted of several murders and sentenced to life in prison. In 1995, Johnny Depp saved Courtney Love's life after she overdosed outside of a nightclub in Los Angeles. He performed CPR and managed to revive her before paramedics arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Instead of flowers, people bring sticks to the 120-year-old grave of a dog named Rex. In the year 2000, a passenger on a Philippine Airlines flight hijacked the plane and robbed all the other passengers. He tried escaping using a homemade parachute, but was afraid to jump out and needed a flight attendant to push him. His parachute failed to open and he plummeted to his death while everyone else was unharmed. If Laverne accepts this man's proposal, he will make you the happiest woman on earth. A 2-year-old girl from Turkey was heard screaming from her backyard before neighbors rushed over to check on her. When they reached her, they found a bite mark on her lip and a 2-foot-long snake dead in front of her. She'd apparently been bitten by the snake and killed it by biting it back in revenge. This preserved specimen shows a child's trachea and lungs with a single peanut lodged inside the airway. Small, smooth foods like peanuts are among the most common choking hazards in young children because they can slip past the throat and become wedged in the windpipe, immediately blocking airflow to the lungs. In some cases, the obstruction causes instant suffocation, while in others it leads to infection, swelling, or gradual respiratory failure if not removed in time. Foreign body aspiration remains one of the leading causes of accidental death in young children, since something as small as a peanut can turn fatal extremely fast. In 2007, a University of Tampa student was walking back to her dorm after a pirate festival when a man she had just met offered to walk her home. Once inside, he raped her and disappeared. Police quickly collected DNA from the scene, but for 14 years there was no match and the case went cold. That was until 2021 when the suspect Jared Vaughn made a critical mistake. He uploaded his DNA to a genealogy website to research his family tree. Investigators used that database to connect Vaughn directly to the crime scene. Despite facing a potential life sentence, Vaughn ultimately accepted a plea deal in 2022 that only resulted in probation and being registered as a sex offender. In 1996, 31-year-old Canadian man Blair Adams suddenly became convinced someone was trying to kill him. He abruptly withdrew his life savings, emptied his safety deposit box of gold, cash, and jewelry, and made several frantic but failed attempts to leave the country. After being denied entry to the U.S., he inexplicably abandoned his construction job in Vancouver, flew to Washington, D.C., rented a car, and began driving aimlessly across multiple states. Witnesses described him as paranoid and agitated, constantly checking over his shoulder and telling strangers someone was after him. Days later, his naked body was found in a Knoxville, Tennessee parking lot, his clothes torn and scattered around him, along with $4,000 in cash, gold, and jewelry, none of it stolen. An autopsy revealed he had sustained many cuts and abrasions consistent with a struggle, and a violent blow had ruptured his stomach, causing sepsis and eventually death. Yet there was no weapon found, no DNA evidence pointing to a killer, and his car keys were found tossed under a nearby vehicle. Hotel staff recalled him pacing in the lobby the night before as if waiting for someone. Nearly 3 decades later, Blair Adams's death remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases in North America. In Gainesville, Georgia, a group of high school students decided to prank their math teacher by toilet papering his yard late at night. When 40-year-old teacher and golf coach Jason Hughes ran outside, he was reportedly joking around and pretending to catch them in the act as they ran back to their car. But as the teens tried to speed away, Hughes slipped on the wet pavement and fell into the road. One of the students, an 18-year-old driving a pickup truck, accidentally ran him over. Hughes was rushed to the hospital but tragically died from his injuries. The driver was initially charged with first-degree vehicular homicide, while several other students were arrested for trespassing and littering. But Hughes's family later asked prosecutors to drop the charges, saying the beloved teacher cared deeply about his students and never would have wanted any of their lives destroyed over a prank. This was the moment a military wife was caught on camera trying to poison her husband. In 2023 in Tucson, Arizona, Melody Feliciano Johnson repeatedly poured bleach into the coffee maker of her U.S. Air Force husband during a bitter divorce. When his coffee began tasting strange and making him feel nauseous, he first assumed the machine had mold before testing it with pool strips, which showed dangerously high levels of chlorine. Suspecting he was being poisoned, he set up hidden cameras in their kitchen, which later recorded his wife adding bleach to the coffee reservoir. Although he avoided serious injury or death by pretending to drink the coffee, investigators said he believed she was trying to kill him to collect his life insurance benefits. She later took a plea deal and was sentenced to probation, mental health treatment, and a no-contact order. These are the graves believed to belong to the 63 wives of Indian General Afzal Khan dating back to 1659. Historical accounts suggest an astrologer predicted the general would die in his next battle, and fearing that his wives would remarry after his death, he ordered all 63 of them to be executed before leaving for war. Soon afterward, Khan was killed in battle just as the prophecy foretold. Today, the cemetery still stands in Afzalpura, India, a site tied to one of the darkest stories associated with honor, power, and possession in Indian history. An Indian actor named Shyam risked his life to transform for a role. He went 9 straight days without sleep so that the tissues under his eyes would swell up. These photos show what 4 years of fighting in World War II did to the face of a young Soviet man. As the museum caption reads, "The first face looks at you, the second face looks through you." Since 9/11, 4 times as many U.S. service members and veterans have died by suicide than have been killed in combat. In 2008, Chinese milk company Sanlu tainted their baby formula with melamine so that they could pass quality control. As a result, at least 6 infants died from kidney stones and hundreds of thousands more got sick. This photo shows main culprit Gang Jinping begging for forgiveness during his trial before he was executed by firing squad. It was such a massive scandal that Chinese people still refuse to buy baby formula domestically. Queen Elizabeth had 2 first cousins named Nerissa and Catherine Lyon who were severely disabled. Nerissa was publicly pronounced dead in 1940, while her sister Catherine was said to have died in 1961. But it was later revealed that they were actually tucked away in a mental asylum without any visits from the royal family until their actual deaths in 1986 and 2014. The U.S. military buys a prank fart spray called liquid ass to train and prepare medics for the stench of the battlefield. This is a 1969 photo of Roman Polanski kneeling next to the door where the word pig is written in his wife Sharon Tate's blood. While Polanski was working on a film in Europe, Tate was stabbed 16 times by members of the Manson family when she was 8.5 months pregnant. Polanski has said that the murders changed him forever and that not being there is his greatest life regret. In honor of Part 9/11, here are the most morbid facts I've ever posted about 9/11. In 1983, professional climber Dan Goodwin illegally climbed the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He said he was trying to bring attention to the inability to rescue trapped occupants of the upper levels of skyscrapers. In August of 2001, actor James Woods reported 4 suspicious men on his flight, but authorities didn't take his claims seriously. Turns out there were 4 of the hijackers who would go on to crash into the World Trade Center, and this was one of their test runs. Afghan resistance leader Ahmad Shamu Sood warned about a major terrorist attack that was about to happen on U.S. soil, but he ended up being assassinated just 2 days before 9/11. An FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill urged the federal government to take the threat of Al-Qaeda more seriously, but he was eventually pushed into early retirement due to disagreements with the Bureau. He went on to head security at the World Trade Center, where he was killed on 9/11. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. But Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while McFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Released in June of 2000, video game Deus Ex didn't include the World Trade Center in its skyline due to technical limitations. The in-game explanation was that they were destroyed in a terrorist attack. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers on fire. Most disturbingly, the album was quickly pulled from shelves after coincidentally being released on September 11, 2001. Only one non-military plane was allowed to fly after all commercial flights were forced to land. It was delivering anti-venom to a snake handler in Florida who was bitten by the highly venomous taipan snake. Sculptor Michael Richards was killed in his art studio on the 92nd floor of the North Tower on 9/11. His art ironically focused on planes, including a sculpture of airplanes piercing a cast of his own body. This iconic photograph of 28-year-old Marcy Borders covered in dust was taken just after the World Trade Center collapsed. Marcy was a bank teller who worked on the 81st floor of the North Tower. She survived the collapse but sadly died from cancer in 2014, likely caused by the toxic fumes she was exposed to. The only off-duty NYPD officer who was killed in 9/11 had signed his retirement papers that morning, but instead of leaving his badge, John William Perry decided to pick it up one last time. Here's a photo of Pork Chop the search dog receiving fluids and comfort before returning to his duties. Many 9/11 rescue dogs were becoming depressed because they weren't finding any live bodies. Rescue workers had to constantly bury themselves to trick the dogs into thinking they were actually saving someone. Tanya Head was a well-known 9/11 survivor who faked being in the South Tower during the attacks. She served as president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network for years until it was revealed she wasn't even in the country on 9/11. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together after the towers collapsed. It's not known if there are any human remains inside. Long after the cleanup, body parts were still being recovered. In 2006, the arm of a victim was found on the roof of a nearby bank. And as recently as 2013, fragments of human remains were discovered on top of a Manhattan rooftop more than a decade after the attacks. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up only damaging one office room, and he was the only person that died. Since 9/11, more than 40,000 people have been diagnosed with cancers and chronic illnesses linked to the toxic dust released when the towers collapsed, a debris cloud made up of pulverized concrete, asbestos, fuel, and materials from office equipment and lighting systems. More first responders have died from 9/11 related illnesses than on the actual day of 9/11. Even nearly 25 years after the attacks, victims of 9/11 are still being identified. In 2025, 3 more people were named through advanced DNA testing using tiny fragments recovered from the World Trade Center site. But of the 2,977 victims, 1,100 of them still have no identified remains. Cyclopia is a real congenital disorder marked by the failure of the embryo to properly divide the orbits of the eyes into 2 separate cavities, resulting in a single eye in the middle of the face. It's usually caused by a mutation in the Sonic the Hedgehog gene, real, and typically results in death within a few hours after birth. The tragic condition occurs in 1 out of every 200 miscarried fetuses, and the maximum recorded lifespan of a child born with cyclopia is 1 day. Following the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, people have been putting up wanted posters across New York City targeting other healthcare CEOs. The posters read, "Healthcare CEOs should not feel safe," after his 28-year-old teacher allegedly made creepy remarks to a 6th grade girl. A young student catfished the man and made him think he was talking to a 14-year-old girl. After receiving concerning messages from the teacher, the boy reported him to police, and he now faces charges of sexual exploitation.
Somebody screamed, "Call the police," and I said no, and I just fired the gun, and this big noise went off, and then I grabbed the phone and got the hell out of there. But I wasn't even in that room. I mean, it just was an explosion. I moved, they moved, the gun went off, and it was like, ah! And it was that fast.
That was Betty Broadick on the witness stand, describing how she shot her ex-husband and his new wife as they slept. On November 5, 1989, the 41-year-old broke into the San Diego home of renowned attorney Dan Broadick and fatally shot him and his wife Linda Colkenna in their bed before turning herself in the next morning. The killings followed a bitter years-long divorce, marked by accusations of infidelity, emotional abuse, and financial control. Betty had supported Dan through medical and law school, only to be discarded for his much younger assistant, who later became his wife. As the marriage unraveled, her behavior escalated, including vandalizing his home, ramming her car into his front door, and multiple psychiatric hospitalizations. Although Betty claimed she only meant to confront the couple, prosecutors played recorded calls in which she said she wished Dan would just die. She was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 30 years to life. This was the moment an Indonesian conservationist broke down in tears after finally witnessing one of the rarest flowers on Earth bloom. After searching the rainforests of Sumatra for 13 years, Diki Andriki and his team found a Rafflesia, a parasitic flower often nicknamed a corpse flower because it releases a powerful odor of rotting flesh to attract insects. The plant spends most of its life hidden inside a host vine and only blooms for a few days, making sightings incredibly rare as researchers never even see one in their lifetime. When the massive, foul-smelling flower began to open in front of him, the weight of more than a decade of dangerous jungle expeditions and failed searches finally hit. This is one of the rarest atmospheric events ever caught on video. Upward lightning erupting from the summit of Volcán de Agua in Guatemala. The bolts appear to tear straight out of the volcano, making it look less like weather and more like something unnatural unfolding in real time. Unlike normal lightning that strikes downward from clouds, this phenomenon shoots upward from the ground into the storm above, triggered by intense electrical imbalance. It's so uncommon that storm chasers never even see it once in their lifetime, and it's almost never captured this clearly over a populated city. In 2021, 75-year-old cyclist Dave Richards was hit by a drunk driver in Bristol, England, suffering catastrophic injuries that left him with burns across half his face, a shattered pelvis, and the loss of an eye. For years, he avoided mirrors and crowds, haunted by his own face and the looks of strangers. But in 2025, doctors at the Bristol 3D Medical Center gave him something never performed before. A 3D printed facial prosthesis that perfectly matched his skin tone, hair, and eye color. Using detailed scans of his head, they built a custom silicone replacement that restored the face he'd lost. In June of 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman proudly posed beside his science fair project on tree frogs at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. It would mysteriously end up being the last photo ever taken of him. Moments later, Kyron was seen walking down the hallway toward his classroom and then upright vanished somewhere inside the school building. Despite an immediate search of every classroom, closet, and crawl space, no one ever saw him leave. When he didn't return home that afternoon, police launched one of the largest search efforts in Oregon history, combing the surrounding woods and rivers for months. His stepmother, Terry Horman, was the last person to see him alive but was never charged. 15 years later, the boy who disappeared inside his own school has never been found. 19-year-old Australian Sam Ballard was a star rugby player until he was dared to eat a garden slug at a team party. The slug ended up infecting him with a condition called rat lungworm, which paralyzed him and eventually killed him 8 years later. In 2014, it was reported that Kim Jong-un killed his own uncle by throwing him into a cage filled with hundreds of stray dogs. In Berlin, Germany, there's now a playground on top of the site where Hitler allegedly killed himself during World War II. Before she bled to death, the last words Ruth Pelkey said to her killer Paula Cooper were, "If you kill me, you will be sorry." 30 years after the murder, Paula took her own life shortly after being released from prison. She wrote in a suicide note that, quote, "I have taken a life and never felt worthy." As a teenager, the late rapper Big Pun was an accomplished boxer and basketball player. But after dropping out of school and battling depression, he became severely addicted to food. He gained about 50 pounds a year for the next decade before dying of a massive heart attack at the age of 28 while weighing just under 700 pounds. One of the traditional ways to make Okinawan snake wine is quite horrific. It involves putting the snake on ice until it passes out, after which it is gutted, bled, and sewn back up. When the snake is thawed out and reawakens, it quickly dies in an aggressive, striking manner. In 1977, the wife of Melvin Carr arrived home one morning and found her husband dead on the floor in their garage, along with 2 young women and a man dead in the trunk of his car. Police determined that Melvin had kidnapped them at gunpoint the night before, raped the 2 women, and gassed them all with a hose connected from his car's exhaust to the trunk. Melvin had apparently passed out from the toxic fumes upon opening the trunk to dispose of them and ended up meeting the same fate as his victims. This is what a broken iris looks like. This usually happens as a result of something whipping into your eye, causing a bruise or tear in the iris. This is what a hairless chimpanzee looks like. Now you know why having a pet chimpanzee is a dumb idea. An extremely rare blonde seal was recently found in the South Georgia Islands. This is what happens when a genetic mutation in a starfish causes it to grow one less limb, resulting in it looking like a pillow. When a 20-year-old Rod Serling was serving in World War II, he watched as his best friend was killed by a falling crate of food. Realizing the irony and unpredictability of life and death, this experience would later inspire him to create the Twilight Zone. Male chicks are considered to be virtually useless to the egg industry, so they're either suffocated in large garbage bags or are shoveled into a high-speed grinder to be torn apart. Kissing a baby on the ear can make it go deaf due to a condition known as cochlear ear kiss injury. Indonesian villager Akbar Salubira went missing in 2017 after setting off for harvest. His remains were found 2 days later inside the body of a reticulated python. It was the first confirmed case of a snake swallowing a fully grown adult human being. An untouched food shop was recently uncovered in the ruins of Pompeii. Traces of pork, fish, beef, and snails were even found in some of the containers. Last March, the Pentagon confirmed that UFOs are real, and nobody seemed to care. A new geoglyph of a cat was discovered in the Nazca Desert, and it appears to be the oldest one in the region. The 2,000-year-old artwork was overlooked for so long because the lines were badly faded over the years. An ancient Roman mosaic floor was discovered under a vineyard in northern Italy after decades of searching for it. And finally, a massive canvas of tens of thousands of Ice Age drawings of extinct animals was found in the Amazon rainforest. The find shows how little we know about the Amazon and that there are still many great discoveries to be made. In 2018, a 66-year-old Canadian man was arrested for murdering 8 people over a 7-year span. During that time, he worked as a mall Santa in Toronto. In 1932 Arizona, a man dressed as Santa Claus jumped out of a plane to parachute into a Christmas parade. Sadly, his parachute failed to open and hundreds of parents had to cover their kids' eyes as Santa plummeted to his death. This is a photo of a man dressed as Santa Claus visiting dying workplace children in a hospital ward in 1906. In December of 1959, a man from Los Angeles murdered his wife with a hammer before taking his own life, all while his 3 kids watched in horror. For the next 50 years, the house went completely untouched, as all of the Christmas decorations were still visible from the windows. Serial killer and cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer was brutally killed in prison when another inmate beat him to death with a metal bar. The killer later revealed that he did it because he was sick of Jeffrey making the prison food look like severed limbs to tease the other inmates. Dutch passenger Cor Pan jokingly made this post just months after Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 went missing. Little did he know his own flight would meet a similar fate, as MH17 was shot down over Ukraine, killing everyone on board. Hannibal of Carthage was famous for intimidating his Roman enemies through the use of war elephants. But the Romans eventually learned that elephants are afraid of squealing pigs, so they would lather pigs in tar and set them on fire, sending the enemy elephants fleeing in horror. This is where the term war pigs originated from. In Miami Gardens, Florida in 2011, O'Neal Ron Morris was arrested after performing unlicensed cosmetic injections using dangerous homemade mixtures that included substances like cement, oil, and sealants. Victims sought cheap body enhancements, but instead suffered severe complications, infections, and permanent disfigurement. In 2012, one of Morris's clients died after being injected, escalating the case to homicide. Morris was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison for manslaughter and for practicing medicine without a license. On July 1, 2016, in Louisville, Kentucky, 21-year-old Joshua Woodruff was struck by a black sedan while waiting for an Uber after celebrating New Year's. Instead of stopping, the driver kept going, dragging Woodruff's body beneath the car for nearly 6 miles along the highway. By the time he was finally dislodged onto the roadway, he'd suffered catastrophic, unrecognizable injuries from being ground against the pavement at high speeds. The driver never came forward, and despite years of investigation, no one has been held accountable. Woodruff's grieving family has continued searching for answers, left with the haunting reality that someone drove for miles knowing exactly what they were doing and chose to keep going. President FDR was having a portrait painted of himself by a watercolor artist on April 12, 1945. But he had been complaining about a headache and suddenly collapsed before the painting was finished. The president had suffered a stroke and died later that day. The unfinished portrait captures his final waking moments. Children that have been exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers who have been in combat. In the year 2000, a man survived a jump off the Golden Gate Bridge but broke his back on impact. He was saved from drowning by a sea lion who kept him afloat until rescuers could reach him. Ever since the incident, the man has said that as soon as he jumped, he realized he didn't want to die. This was the final photo taken of James Gandolfini the night the 51-year-old actor suffered a massive heart attack in his hotel room in Rome, Italy. Hours before his sudden death, he scarfed down a double order of fried king prawns in a huge pile of foie gras, washed down with 2 pina coladas, 4 shots of rum, and a few beers. It would end up being his final meal. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast, and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of this photo died, but the man and his daughter happened to survive. This security photo shows teacher Dave Sanders guiding students out of the cafeteria during the Columbine High School massacre of 1999. After hearing gunshots from outside the school, Sanders sounded the alarm and saved over 100 students by herding them away from the shooters. Sadly, he was later shot 3 times and ended up being the only teacher killed in the shooting. In 2016, Texas father Daniel Shaver was held up by police after he was seen pointing a pellet gun out of his hotel window. Several officers had rifles pointed at Schaefer in the hallway as he attempted to comply with them, but their commands were confusing and contradictory, especially since Shaver was drunk. For example, they told Shaver not to put his hands down for any reason before telling him to start crawling towards them. As Shaver was crawling and begging for his life, he reached back to pull his pants up and was killed instantly by Officer Philip Brailsford, who later claimed he thought Shaver was reaching for a weapon. Brailsford was charged with second-degree murder and found not guilty, since the full unedited footage wasn't released until hours after his acquittal. Brailsford was rehired by the department and reimbursed for all the medical expenses he paid while seeking treatment for the PTSD he claimed he acquired from the shooting. Because of this, Brailsford was medically retired and now collects a $2,500 pension every month. In 2000, 4-year-old Kian Hongyan survived being hit by a speeding truck driver but had to have both of her legs amputated. Sadly, due to her family's financial struggles, she couldn't be provided with prosthetics and instead had to improvise with half of a basketball. She became known as China's basketball girl, a symbol of resilience despite overwhelming odds. A few years later, her story went viral and she was offered free prosthetics by a hospital in Beijing when she turned 11. A pair of identical twins from Brazil would use their resemblance to impersonate each other and date as many women as possible, and then defend themselves from allegations that they were cheating on their girlfriends. They would even take turns having intercourse with the same women by routinely swapping with each other without the women knowing. After one of them got a woman pregnant and a DNA test was inconclusive when both twins refused to say who was the father, a judge ordered both of the twins to pay maintenance to the little girl. The judge said they were taking away from the girl's right to know who her real father was. In July of 2016, 17-year-old Mike Mansholt suddenly disappeared while exploring ancient catacombs on the island of Malta. 5 days later, his body was found at the base of a cliff, and investigators initially believed he had died in a fall, but the autopsy revealed disturbing inconsistencies. Despite the apparent fall, he had no broken bones, and examiners found that his internal organs were missing, removed through a large opening in the abdomen. Authorities were never able to explain how the organs were removed or what happened to them, leaving the circumstances of his death deeply unsettling and unresolved. Rape-kun was a Humboldt penguin at the Tobu Zoo in Japan, whose longtime mate Midori eventually left him for a younger penguin, leaving him largely isolated from the rest of the colony. But in 2017, the zoo placed cardboard cutouts of characters from the anime Kimono Zoo around the park, including one of Hululu, an anthropomorphic Humboldt penguin, inside his enclosure. Visitors soon noticed Rape-kun repeatedly standing next to the cutout for long periods, and even displaying what appeared to be courtship behavior toward it. Photos of the unusual bond soon went viral online, and the zoo eventually decided to leave the cutout inside the enclosure for him. Rape-kun died a few months later at about 21 years old, with the cardboard character still standing by his side. Who's cutting onions? That was the sound of gunshots echoing through the streets during the siege of Sarajevo in the Bosnian War. During the siege, civilians lived under constant sniper fire from soldiers positioned in the surrounding mountains. Between 1992 and 1995, more than 10,000 people were killed in the city, including at least 1,500 children. Decades later, investigators finally uncovered extremely disturbing evidence suggesting some of those sniper positions were used for what became known as the Sarajevo Sniper Safari. According to testimony in ongoing criminal investigations, wealthy foreign visitors allegedly paid tens of thousands of dollars to Bosnian Serb forces for the opportunity to fire at innocent civilians trapped inside the besieged city. Witnesses claim the visitors were escorted to hillside sniper nests overlooking Sarajevo, where they could shoot at people crossing streets or running between buildings. Some reports even described a price list for targets, with higher payments allegedly associated with killing children. Italian prosecutors opened a war crimes investigation in 2025, and the first suspect has been formally placed under investigation for multiple counts of murder related to the alleged sniper tourism. Here's a disturbing video of a man performing a religious milk offering ritual in the Ganges River in India, while nearby homeless and malnourished children rush in and try to catch it to drink. The ritual, meant to symbolize devotion and abundance, turns into a heartbreaking scene of desperation, as children who clearly have nothing to eat are forced to watch food being poured away, a moment that captures the extreme poverty surrounding one of the holiest rivers in the world. In 2012, archaeologists digging beneath a parking lot in Leicester, England, uncovered a human skeleton buried beneath several feet of asphalt. DNA testing later confirmed the remains belonged to King Richard III, the English king who was killed in battle in 1485 and had been missing for more than 500 years. One of the key clues was the severe curvature of the spine found in the skeleton, matching historical accounts that Richard had scoliosis and an uneven shoulder. The discovery solved one of England's oldest royal mysteries and revealed that a medieval king had been buried beneath what later became a modern car park.